Hello, my name is Marie O'Reilly and I'm the Editor and Research Fellow here at the International Peace Institute. And today I'm delighted to be speaking with Nicholas Kristof, columnist at the New York Times, co-author of 4 best-selling books with his wife, Cheryl Wu Dunn, and winner of 2 Pulitzer Prizes, one of them also jointly with his wife. Nick, welcome to the International Peace Institute.
Delighted to be here.
So for the past 6 years, you and your wife, Cheryl, have been building a global movement focusing on women's empowerment. And I want to start by asking you, why do you call this the central moral challenge of our time?
When I started out as a foreign correspondent, I would never have imagined that that's how I would describe it. I thought that the serious foreign policy issues involve missiles or troops or even trade, but women's issues, that sort of sounded kind of soft and peripheral. And then more and more, I think Cheryl and I saw that in country after country, in place after place, the most egregious human rights violations involve things done to women and girls. And whether it's forced marriage or female genital mutilation or domestic violence, or lack of resources that go into health conditions that afflict women. Over and over you see that. And I think the thing that really struck me was the fact that there are so many missing women, that women are actually discriminated against to death. And as we do the math, in any 10-year period, more women and girls are discriminated against to death worldwide than all the people killed in all the genocides of the 20th century. So when you think of it in those terms, how can this not be the preeminent moral challenge of the century?
And when it comes to addressing this challenge, we can take many different approaches. We can look at policies or legal frameworks. Why did you choose to emphasize building a global movement?
I think it starts with awareness, in a sense, and there's no silver bullet here. In a sense, it's silver buckshot. There are a bunch of little things that will help a little bit, but you can't begin to address issues unless they're on the agenda, unless people are talking about them. And one of the impediments to empowering women has been the fact that these are often invisible issues, or the issues that are hard to talk about or embarrassing to talk about. And so our hope is that if we can leverage that concern and sometimes outrage, then that will in turn be a impetus for better policies and all across the board.
And this is such a difficult thing to change, and as you say, it crosses so many divides, geographically, age divides, and I'm just curious, is there sort of a model movement that you could base this on? Is there something else in history that we can look back to where a challenge as big as this was overcome?
I would say that the best example of a movement is the anti-slavery movement beginning in Britain in the 1780s. Here you have something that has just been accepted by every major religion, every major philosopher. It's just part of the bedrock. And in 1780, the only people upset about it were a few Quakers. By the mid and late 1780s, you had people all across Britain boycotting sugar because it was being produced on slave plantations, signing petitions against slavery, and ultimately leading to the abolition of slavery, first by Britain and ultimately by the entire world. And so, that was a stunning achievement. And I think that's maybe the best model of a movement that we've ever had.
And given the efficacy of movements, and there's a lot of evidence out there, particularly in the area of women's security, that shows that movements, feminist movements or women's movements and different kinds of grassroots movements are sometimes most effective at achieving change in this area. So, here at the International Peace Institute, we're helping the UN and governments to look at policy and legal frameworks. Do you think that the UN and governments should be shifting their focus to supporting grassroots movements instead?
I think that because we emerge from a culture that is about laws, that we put too much faith, frankly, in laws as a lever for change. I look at female genital mutilation. Since the 1970s, there's been this global effort involving I don't know how many UN conferences, everybody flying in to say how awful this is. Laws have been changed in country after country. In Guinea now it's a crime punishable in some cases by death to cut a girl's genitals. And in fact 99% of girls in Guinea are still cut. I think that we don't quite appreciate how often the laws are meaningless 25 miles outside the capital, and that sometimes this push for legal solutions or for treaties becomes not an impetus for further action, but a substitute for further action. And I don't want to give up on those levers, but I think we also need to be much more focused on what is actually happening rather than just the pronouncements and legal frameworks.
Now, one of the reasons I think your work on this has been so impactful is because you're a man writing about so-called women's issues. And, I want to ask you, are these really women's issues? And what can men be doing to be part of the solution?
Well, I think it often, people find it kind of strange that a man, especially in such a serious place as the New York Times op-ed page, is writing about these kinds of issues. And Cheryl and I wrote Half the Sky as a couple quite deliberately because we thought that it would be a little weird if it was just a man doing it. But on the other hand, if it's just women talking about these issues, then they're immediately marginalized. It's unfair, but it's just how it works. And at the end of the day, gay rights got more traction when straight people started talking about them. Civil rights became important when you had freedom riders from the North going down south. And in the same way, when you have more than 100 million women discriminated against to death, then that's not just some soft women's issue. That is a human rights issue that concerns all of us.
And where did this come from for you? I mean, did you have a male role model in this area, or?
I think I had powerful teachers in my mom and in Cheryl, but I'd say above all, it just came from reporting. I did what I thought was going to be one article about sex trafficking in Asia, and came across young girls locked up in brothels in Cambodia. And this, I realized, was exactly like 19th century slavery, except they were going to be dead of AIDS by their 20s.
So finally, Nick, how can people get involved? How can they join the movement?
I'd say that there's no one issue. There are lots of important issues, so they should find one that speaks to them. In the back of Half the Sky, we list a bunch of things that people can get engaged in, and in the back of our new book, A Path of Peers, we likewise list some great organizations and some things you can do in the next 10 minutes. So I'd encourage people to look at those options. But to find some cause that speaks to you, and then you can support it. Essentially, there are three different ways. I mean, you can write checks if you have the right bank account. You can volunteer, which is very powerful. Or you can engage in advocacy, lend your voice to those who don't have one. And so find the right issue and concentrate your efforts on that in whichever form, advocacy, volunteering, or donation is most effective in your case.
And do you think, are we about to reach a tipping point on this with all of this activity?
We absolutely are. I mean, Cheryl and I, in a sense, get way too much credit because we were pushing on an open door. Attitudes were already changing by the time Half the Sky was published, and they are continuing to change. They're continuing to change in this country, in other countries, now in elementary school worldwide. There's a negligible gender gap in education. That's astonishing. And I think this is a battle we're winning because it's not just about what is morally right. It's about, if you want your country to be wealthy and advanced, you have to educate your girls. You have to bring them out of the margins and into the labor force. You are punishing the men in your country unless you empower the women.
Mm-hmm. Nick, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
My pleasure.